So this is an amazing, awesome, wonderful conference, and thank you again so much to all the organizers. I had the great privilege back in February when I went to the February 17th Keystone Pipeline demonstration in Washington, D.C., feeling a little bit like I wasn't there to say forward with Obama on climate. And I wasn't there to have Obama's back, to tell you the truth. I was there to say, stop stabbing us in our backs, Obama. And I had this kind of love-hate relationship with the climate movement as we know it, because it tends to be very inside the box, as we all know. And I don't need to repeat that because I don't want to demean what they do. They've done something wonderful, which is really important and which begs to be expanded upon. And I'd like to focus on that in a minute as to how we can expand on it. But I also wanted to point out that it was just so uplifting. It was such a relief that Chris had asked me to be part of this Eco-Socialist Forum, which was taking place the night before the march. And it felt to me like that was the real heart of the environmental movement, and that is what the new climate movement looks like. And that's where the energy really was. And the energy was there out in the street. It was not up at the microphone, on the stage, where there was lots of praise for Obama, concern about his legacy. This is not about his legacy. This is about whether we have a planet to inhabit in 30 or 50 years from now. That's what this is about. And we need a climate movement that's up to the challenge here. I think the challenge of getting outside of the box, getting outside of the silos that we're all in. Whatever little piece of the movement we're working on, it tends to be our language. So we're talking about food sovereignty, we're talking about student debt, we're talking about getting rid of the banks, creating public banks. I've been really just so delighted to see how much convergence there is in our visions. And one of the things that made me feel really at home at the Eco-Socialist Forum back in February was that when I looked at what the agenda was for that forum, it was exactly the same agenda. It was the same flyer that I had prepared to go there as a Green, to say, here's what we need to do. It's not this little itty-bitty kind of all of the above, which is it's not a climate plan. That is a distraction. It's smoke and mirrors. It's deception. All of the above is not the solution. We need 100% clean, renewable energy by 2030, actually. Let's beat the crisis on this, and we can. There have been some wonderful studies out recently, and Mark Jacobson's study, if you haven't seen it, released from Stanford University. He's an engineer, published in the I think it's called Energy Policy. It uses the state of New York as a microcosm to show exactly what it would take and what it would cost to get to 100% clean renewable energy by 2030. And that means shutting down our nuclear power plants, our coal plants, and continuing to ban the fracking and to shut it down where it exists. The amazing thing, which I really want to, especially plant in your mind, is that this is not only possible, we can beat the climate clock. It's not a matter of, can we push back against irreversible climate change. We can actually beat the climate clock by getting to 100% by 2030. And I should mention also that one of the big leaps forward we can take is by not only banning natural gas, new production, but by shutting down existing production as quickly as we can. Because by doing that, we get a huge boost towards towards climate neutrality. And the reason for that is so-called natural gas, which is unnatural gas. It should remain beneath the surface of the earth. But that natural gas is one of the very most polluting climate gases for the first 2 decades. After that, it deteriorates and it approaches carbon dioxide after about a century. But if you can shut down natural gas and prevent it from expanding, it creates a big leap forward towards carbon neutrality. Because over a 20-year time frame, natural gas is 75 times more harmful than carbon dioxide. So we actually get a huge leap forward by going after natural gas as quickly as possible, and above all, that means not expanding any new natural gas, no fracking, and shutting down the natural gas that we have. But in getting there, by 2030, the most amazing thing about this study is that it shows it actually pays for itself. It pays for itself. You know, the conventional wisdom is, oh no, we could never afford to do that. It would cost way too much. But in fact, the costs of conversion are actually paid for, get this, by the savings from health impacts that are prevented by moving to clean, renewable energy. And that doesn't even include the health benefits of moving to a clean, sustainable food system, which is also part of the benefits, but it hasn't been costed out yet to see how much more money that saves us. We spend right now $3 trillion a year. $3 trillion. That's 3 times as much as what we spend on the military-industrial security complex. We're spending 3 times as much on this sick care system, that is private and public expenditures. Yet we know that about 75% of those costs would be averted by doing the right thing up front. And what is that right thing? It's moving to a green economy, to have a healthy food system, an active and healthy transportation system, and getting rid of pollution. And this actually occurred. This occurred in Cuba when their oil pipeline went down in the early 1990s, and suddenly their economy is crashing because they don't have the imports and the support from the Soviet Union anymore. Overnight, they had to convert to clean renewable energy, a healthy local food system, and active and public transportation. So suddenly they're not breathing any more pollution. They have local, healthy, and largely plant-based food to eat. And they're going places under muscle power. So what do you think happens? You know, you'd think they'd be totally stressed out, and you'd see their health really crashing because their economy has crashed. But actually what happened then, this is documented in the Professional Epidemiology Journal, so it's not like this is, you know, Cuba propaganda or something like that. Definitely not. What happened was, within 3 to 5 years, their obesity rates declined by 50%, their death rates from diabetes declined by 50%, and their death rates from heart attacks and strokes went down by 20 to 35%. That is something we cannot do in this country with a $3 trillion healthcare system. We can't even get close to that, and they did it by spending $0. So, you know, I just want to make the point that we can do this if health counted, if our lives 30 or 50 years from now counted, if democracy counted, we would be there today. Because as you know, the debate in the climate community now, and the debate among really everybody who's not paid to walk around, you know, with their eyes closed, the debate is not whether or not, you know, we are in rather deep and troubled waters on the climate. That's not the debate. The debate now is whether we hit the wall, or should I say we go over the cliff. Will it be in 2050 or will it be in 2100? You know, so we are debating the date at which civilization and arguably human survival comes to an end. this is outrageous that we are having such a debate about when it all shuts down. The debate should be, what do we need to do right now to ensure that we transition with all human haste, all possible intensity. We move right now to that economy which is clean, just, green, and sustainable. And we do have the know-how and the wherewithal to do that. It's a matter of, I think, using the power that we actually have. Because what happened 2 weeks ago? With almost no lead time to get organized at all, for the first time in history that I know of, we stopped a war before it started. With no time at all to get organized and get the word out. You know, there wasn't time to go out and demonstrate or do civil disobedience. You know, it was like drop everything and call your congressmen and women and go there and tell them, you know, in no uncertain terms, if you take us to war, we'll show you the door. And that's how we need to lobby. It's not on bended knee, it's with a power fist. That's why we need third parties. That is why we need independent parties. That's not the whole revolution. It's not all in the ballot box. But if we neglect the ballot box, then they can neglect us on all policy making across the board. So we have a paradigm there that we can build on. And I want to say 2 minutes about a program for an emergency green economic transformation. And I think that needs to be our demand, and that we settle for nothing less. An emergency green economic transformation that puts everyone back to work, creates 20 million jobs right now, that puts a halt to climate change, and that makes wars for oil obsolete. That is what an emergency green economic transformation can do, and by the way, it also delivers our health back to us at the same time, without having to pour pills and medical procedures on us, simply by removing the poisons in our food, our air, and our water that are part of the system. We can also reclaim our health as part of the windfall of this emergency green economic transition. And I think we need to insist on that at the local, state, national, and international levels. Why are we even talking about a war in Syria right now? They talk about Syria as a, as a surrogate war. You know, well, what exactly is it a surrogate for? It's a surrogate really for fossil fuel access, and specifically the natural gas pipelines that want to go through Syria from the Persian Gulf. They want to go through Syria to get to the Mediterranean in order to feed Europe's hunger for energy. Well, if Europe had a 100% clean renewable energy system, that competition wouldn't be taking place. And if we had 100% clean renewable energy, we wouldn't need to be putting $1 trillion a year into our military industrial security complex, which is basically about securing oil and fossil fuels. So this is a win-win scenario. And in addition to calling for jobs, and jobs as a human right, jobs at living wages as a human right, it also calls for an economic bill of rights, which includes education as a human right, including through college and forgiving student debt. Instead of bailing out the banks, which we are still doing to the tune of $85 billion a month, that's a well-kept secret, but that is what QE3 is all about. Quantitative easing 3 is about printing, creating $85 billion a month and giving it to Wall Street. That's why the stock market has had this amazing recovery. It's partly the housing recovery as well, and why everyday people do not have a taste of that recovery, because it's all going to the top. Instead, we can be bailing out the students and not the banks. We should be breaking up the banks and putting the bankers in jail who got us into this mess to start with. And we refer to this emergency green economic transformation as a Green New Deal. And it builds on the New Deal that actually did get us out of the Great Depression. So this is not like rocket science or an experiment. This is something that we know works. It's absolutely inexcusable that it hasn't already been implemented, and we should insist on nothing less. It includes also, I should mention, financial reforms, breaking up the banks, creating public banks and municipal banks as public utilities. It also includes public utilities as a human right, including access to transportation, to energy, electricity, heat, and the internet as public utilities that are run for the public good, not for profit, at minimal cost. And of course, it includes demilitarization. So, you know, this is it's a fairly comprehensive program, but it's something that is completely, it represents what the American people are calling for, and I want to really underscore that. It's not as though, you know, we are some fringe movement, you know, to be talking about jobs and good living wages, and by the way, defeating the Trans-Pacific Partnership. If you don't know about it, every fight that you are fighting now for local, you know, food, to stop fracking, to shut down nuclear power plants, for living wages, for safe working conditions. Forget it, because after the next month, if they pass the TPP, the protections that we establish at the community, state, and national level are all trumped by the multinational corporations who can sue the pants off of us for trying to defend workers' rights, human health, and the environment. They can trump us for, get this, reducing future profits. That's what has priority. So go to, if you don't know about this, if you're not already plugged in, go to flushthetpp.org, a memorable URL, and you can get plugged in. We can stop this. We have stopped over a dozen of these outrageous corporate free trade agreements in the past. It's all a matter of getting sunlight on it. They're trying to keep it quiet, and they're going to try to ram it through Congress this month to get fast-track authority, which means then it's out of our hands. So I hate to lobby. I never lobby. But if you lobby with a power fist, that is, don't ask your elected officials, tell them. Tell them that they are in deep trouble and that you will work to have them unelected at the next opportunity if they allow this to go through. So weigh in, be heard. And that's what we need to do as well on an emergency green economic transformation. We really can fix this. We can fix it in time, and we can fix it in a way that addresses these converging crises that every one of us feel, that the American public out there feels. What they don't have, you know, is a network and something to tie into and something to get organized with. So that is the struggle. It's how we organize. And I want to leave you with one last thought and one last URL. The conversation keeps coming up. You know, what do we do? We need to do something really different. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. So remember about 2 months ago, the anti-GMO movement got out. They had a day to show their power. And 2 million people came out around the world. And what happened? Monsanto got scared. And they said, okay, you can have Europe back. For 1 day of peaceful demonstrations. Now imagine, what if everybody who needed a job, who needs living wages, who needs to get out of student debt, who needs to get out of the school to prison pipeline, you know, you start adding up these numbers. 1 out of every 2 Americans is in poverty. 39 million students are in debt. Just from those numbers right there, we've got a quorum. What if we got all those people to come out for a day or maybe a week or maybe a month of direct action for emergency economic transformation for people, peace, and the planet? And we call it something like a global climate convergence for people, peace, and the planet, or maybe it's a global climate strike. But it's about getting out, not taking no for an answer, and standing up for the future that we can have. We have the power to do it, like Alice Walker says. Biggest way people give up power is by not knowing they have it to start with. We have the power, we got the solutions, we got the vision. It's all about getting organized. If you're interested, either slip me your email or go to globalclimateconvergence.org. At this point, it's just a sign up, but it will be a website soon. And let's give them something to think about.
Thank you so much. Setting us off to a great start, and the follow-up to that is a second speaker, Richard Larios. He is a member of, and I love the name of this, the Free Association of Anarchists. Association, Anarchists, Free Association. And he has helped in the creation and participation of a whole range of grassroots movements and programs and projects throughout the Los Angeles area. Richard, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm really happy to see everybody here. I was talking about, what is eco-socialism earlier or late last year with a friend from the YJC, Young Communist League, and we're throwing out ideas. What is it? What does it look like, right? I actually took the stance because he felt that there was a set utopia, right? There's a set eco-socialist society out there. We haven't figured it out yet. I personally felt that when we're talking about eco-socialism, we're talking more of ethics, right? Because, we don't want to uproot anyone's culture. I'm really against cultural genocide. I'm indigenous, and so I'm anti anything that's going to infringe on someone's culture, personally. So what we're asking, what is eco-socialism? What are we talking about? We're talking about socialism that keeps in mind the ecosystem in which we find ourselves, right? So when thinking of that, shouldn't we naturally think about the way we treat other species and whether or not we practice something that Peter Singer calls speciesism, a discrimination against other species, right? I mean, we could go into a whole range of topics as to why we are that way. Some people say it's religion, right? Man is, is everything, and everything was made around man. I tend to believe more in evolution where, we got to this point, right? We got to this position of knowledge and understanding. And so let's say that's part of the ethic, right? We'll keep that, on the back burner. I'm not here to set what is and isn't, but, let's say that is one. If we follow that line, obviously we'd have to deal with the question of animal factory farming, which is said to be in the top 3 reasons of deforestation, right? Not only that, but if you're talking about agrarian justice, you're talking about you're feeding 21 pounds of protein to animals so that you could eat 1 pound of their flesh. That doesn't make sense, right? So we're talking about eco-socialism. What are we talking about, right? We're talking about ethics, So let's say we get rid of the animal farms, right? Shut them down. No more animal factory farms. Well, all right, but now that's cultural genocide because a lot of cultures are based upon what they consume, what they eat, right? So like I said, I'm anti-cultural genocide. So what's the question of that? What's the answer to that question, better said? Well, why not decentralize it? Why is it so centralized? Capitalism has everything centralized. Centralization is very dangerous, right? If food is only being produced in 2 places in the world and they say, I'm not feeding you, well, you're in a very bad position, right? So just this one idea, this one, ethical idea leads us to a strain of things, right? We get rid of animal factory farms. What are you doing? You're decentralizing the food source, right? Now everyone is able to eat. Not only that, you're taking away, fishing and all that kind of stuff from little villages, little towns, so on and so forth, but you're giving it back to them. You're empowering the people, right? So what's the other question, though? So who owns the land, right? Who owns the land? Is land property to begin with? That's another ethical question, right? Is land property that we can say, this is yours, that's his, yada, 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 right? I personally disagree that land is property, right? And I love when Thomas Paine said it, right? He said, it is a position to be that the earth in its natural uncultivated state was and ever would have remained the common property of the human race. In that state, every being would have had a joint proprietor of the soil and in all its natural production. Right? So now if we use this as a basis of ethics, what does that lead us to? There could honestly be crimes against earth. Right? There could be crimes against the earth which could be interpreted to as crimes against humanity. Right? So questions of pollution don't belong to individual corporations, right? They don't even belong to individual communities. They belong to the world in itself. So when I think of eco-socialism, I'm thinking of a socialism, right? A democratic process that takes into account everything that's going to be affected by that decision, right? So we're talking about trying to build a whole new democratic system. We're not just talking about, little reforms, little tweaks here. Overall, the structure stays the same. We're talking about a new system that has yet to be created. And so when we're talking about eco-socialism, in my opinion, we're talking about an ethical question, right? So if we don't own the land, right, and we're looking for harmony as opposed to manipulation with all the beings that we share this land with, right, then what is the democratic process that keeps them in mind when we make these decisions, right? And so if this is truly eco-socialism that we're looking for, then how do we vote on what natural resources get used for what, right? Because if we agree that the earth belongs to no one but belongs to everyone, then everyone is a stakeholder in decisions that affect the earth, and so all these decisions belong to everybody, right? And so that's what I want to propose, that eco-socialism to me is these ethical questions, and if you follow these ethical questions, they'll lead you to a plan of action, right? For me personally, I want to destroy animal factory farming, decentralize it, right? We're going to lose. They said that the Pew Commission on Industrial Farm Animal Production said that in the United States, because we eat meat every meal, right? The average American eats meat every meal, right? That's 3 times a day. That if we were to cut back on our meat consumption by 10%, we'd be able to feed an extra 60 million people, right? That's only 10%. Right? Let's say 30%. Let's say we don't eat meat for breakfast anymore. Period. Right? How many more people is that? Right? I mean, if you're thinking about it, and the environmental impacts that animal factory farms have are crazy. And that's not even talking about biological, because all these antibiotics that they feed the animals are creating new strains of viruses that we don't even know how to deal with yet. Right? So when you follow these principles, it'll already lead you to a plan of action, right? So what is the plan of action? Do what you see fit. That's my personal opinion. It's so massive that I don't throw out voting. I don't throw out, pushing McDonald's or wherever, have a vegetarian option. Hey, why not? You're promoting the idea that, we shouldn't eat so much meat, Do what you see fit, but do something. Because the truth is, our actions have already fucked us. Right? We haven't felt it fully yet. We're going to feel it. But we've already set in motion such a damaging effect to the earth that we can't even comprehend yet, right? As to what is going to occur and how many of us are going to die. And I have a friend who's big on biology, and she's always saying, humans, cockroaches, and rats are going to survive, right? But we don't know to what proportion, right? And she's always saying she's waiting for the new disease that's going to be man-made, right? The new disease that's going to wipe us all out is going to be our own doing. We have a culture of suicide. We don't care. We don't care. I don't know how to say it. Even me, I care, right? I don't eat meat, right? Hey, I'm vegetarian. I'm going vegan, right? I bike and I walk when I can, yada, yada, yada. I still own a 4Runner, right? I still own a 4Runner in a city. Why is that? Because of capitalism. And that's something that I feel it's always been a disconnect between red and green, right? And as an anarchist, it's blood. It's blood. We hate the green anarchists, right? We hate them. Like we see them, we beef it out. Like, what are you? I'm red. Oh, I'm green. I'm just black, right? Black anarchist. I like anarchism, and whatever other strands you're from, hey, I'll synthesize it into my overall ideology. But the point is that if you're not looking at the ecological problems, from an anti-capitalist position, you're not talking about much. You're talking about tweaking things, you're talking about mild reforms, and trust me, I work with a lot of animal liberationists, and they have no problem with capitalism. They say, no, capitalism is not the problem. It's human beings. It's human nature. And I look at them and I say, no, you know what? My friend Dr. Flores, who's a cultural anthropologist at UCLA, he's always saying that anthropologists, they're aware that the environment and the culture has an effect on human beings, right? So that's commonly known, it's commonly understood. So why would someone think that it's just this innate, savagery within humans? It's not. And not only that, even if it was, right? Let's say, for instance, whatever, racism is just some inborn thing, and, that's just how we are because yada, 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 whatever reason. No matter what, capitalism uses everything as a tool, and everything on capitalism is whatever it was on steroids, right? So regardless, we have to kill capitalism. We have to smash it. Right? There's no other in between. And so with that, I also like to add that we have to rebuild that connection, right? We have a disconnect with the environment. I mean, shit, I'm trying to garden and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so lost. I'm just like, shit, right? And there's such a disconnect. And it's horrible, right? And what does that do? You take the environment for granted because you never come in contact with it, right? Even the disconnect with animals, right? When's the last time anyone seen a cow get butchered? Or a chicken get its feathers plucked? I lived in Nicaragua for a bit when my dad got deported, so I've seen some of it. And my uncle, there's a butcher, and I just went back there maybe a year ago and spent the summer with my uncle, and he's still a butcher. I was vegetarian at the time, so he didn't kill anything while I was there. But I could see his workshop and everything. But it's the point that there's such a disconnect. My uncle, who's a butcher, loves his animals. His animals sleep with him, right? And I'm talking about pigs, and he tells me pigs are clean, pigs are smart, right? And I don't know, I didn't really talk to the pigs too much, but they seemed okay, right? Yeah. Oh, I like that one. I like that. But it's the point that there's still a connection. Even though he consumes these animals, there's a connection that he's made, right? Because what capitalism does, and it's beautiful, right? Because it works for capitalism. It alienates us from everything and everyone, right? We don't even, I walked around one time trying to do an experiment, right? We anarchists, we filmed it. It was brilliant. It was very funny. And all we did was we said hello and good morning to everybody to see how many good mornings, hellos we would get and how many people would stop and try to engage us in a conversation. We did 100 people before we stopped, and we found one person that would talk to us. Right?
Where was it? Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles by Pershing Square. I don't know if that's a bad spot. If maybe I went to South Central, I would have had a different reaction. But, we're so distrusting of each other, right? And it's capitalism, right? Even when you're in South Central, you think you're gonna get shot, you think you're gonna get robbed. You don't know because they portrayed this to you. They don't want you to talk to each other. And it's a form to make us victims and to keep you powerless. The same way in my own city, I seen a neighbor getting beat by her husband, right? So I run out and all my neighbors say, no, don't worry about it. I called the cops already. I say, well, first of all, I don't like the cops. They're not gonna make anything better. But second of all, that doesn't mean that I'm okay now. I'm gonna just go back to my apartment and hear her screaming as she's being beat. But that's how we think. You see a house burning down, what do? You don't run in there. You don't try to throw water on it, right? That's not what they tell you. You call the fire department. That's it. After that, you just sit down, relax. So we're losing that connection. There's a disconnect with everything, right? Even with each other, there's a disconnect. With other beings, there's a disconnect. When you could not care about, a little calf, right, being born, right? And cows are actually very sentimental, and they're actually very attached to the mothers, and they pull them apart, and they don't let them move because they want that veal. It's so nice, it's so soft, right? And you don't care, you don't give a fuck. There's a disconnect, right? When you can honestly say, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna drive my car all day because I don't like to walk 2 blocks, right? I don't want to take the bus here, even though the bus ride is only 20 minutes, right? Or I don't have to be in a hurry, so I could take the bus, right? But no, I want to be lazy, I want to take the car, right? Because it's easier. There's a disconnect. Because you're not understanding that, you know what? All these beings play a part in the ecosystem that we're trying to protect. So from an eco-socialist standpoint, you know, I think that's what the question is. What are the ethics that we're working with, right? And I think from those ethics, our plan of action will naturally arise. So thank you all.